Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we really get into the details behind the headlines, focusing on the most crucial insights from authoritative sources.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're tackling something that honestly affects so many people. That really persistent, nagging shoulder pain. You know, the kind, where everyday things suddenly feel impossible?
Oh, absolutely. Reaching up for something on a high shelf or even just trying to get comfortable at night, it can be incredibly disruptive.
Exactly. We're talking about rotator cuff tears,
Yeah.
and specifically the really difficult ones, the ones surgeons often call massive rotator cuff tears.
These aren't just minor strains. They can be genuinely debilitating injuries, really impacting daily life, work, sleep, everything.
And repairing them has been, well, a major challenge in orthopedics for a long time, hasn't it?
For decades, yes. Standard surgical techniques, while they often work well for smaller tears, they frequently struggle when it comes to these really large, complex injuries.
Leaving patients sometimes with ongoing pain, maybe limited movement, and even the possibility of needing more surgery down the line.
That's the unfortunate reality for some, yes. Which leads us to why we're doing this deep dive today.
Right. Our mission today is to explore a solution that's been evolving rapidly and is, frankly, pretty groundbreaking. Patch augmentation.
Think of it as adding a reinforcement to that torn tendon. But it's more than just a physical patch. It's often designed to be biologically active too.
So we want to unpack what these patches actually are, how they're supposed to work, biomechanically, and maybe even at a cellular level to help the body heal itself.
And crucially, what the real-world impact has been. What does the evidence tell us about how well they work for patients?
We'll look at the science, the successes, and yeah, probably some of the setbacks too, because that's how medical innovation works, right? It's rarely a straight path.
Definitely not. And our main guide for this discussion is a really thorough, comprehensive, systematic review. It's titled Rotator Cuff Repair with Patch Augmentation. What do we know?
Okay.
It was published back in October 2022 in the Archives of Bone and Joint Surgery. And it's important to stress this isn't just one study.
Right, it's a review. It pulls together lots of research.
Exactly. It synthesizes a huge amount of existing literature. It represents the collective knowledge and experience of a team of leading orthopedic specialists from various places.
And what's really valuable here for our deep dive is that this specific review was co-authored by a team of highly respected experts in the field,
Yes.
including Professor Mohammed Imam. His background in orthopedic surgery and research, his work at places like Ashford and St. Peter's NHS Foundation Trust, the Fortius Clinic in London, it's extensive.
His contributions, and those of his co-authors, are really central to understanding these complex challenges and the innovations trying to address them.
So their expertise really provides the foundation for everything we're going to discuss today. It sets the stage for a really in-depth exploration.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's start by really defining the scale of the problem, because understanding the challenge helps us appreciate why things like patch augmentation even came about.
Absolutely. The review makes it clear. Massive rotator cuff tears remain a really significant hurdle in orthopedic surgery.
Even with all the tech advancements, better instruments, refined techniques.
Even with all that, despite decades of progress, the healing rates for these bigger, more complex tears are still, well, quite variable.
Some patients do great, others not so much.
Exactly. And predicting who will do well has been surprisingly difficult. It's not always straightforward.
So the goal of the surgery itself is pretty clear, right? You want to fix the tear.
The primary objectives are twofold. First, improve the patient's symptoms, reduce pain, restore function. And second, improve the structural integrity of the rotator cuff itself. You want that tendon to heal back to the bone properly.
But here's where it gets complicated. As the review points out, sometimes patients feel better, their function improves.
Even if the repair fails structurally, meaning the tendon actually re-tears later on.
That seems counterintuitive. How can you feel better if it's torn again?
The body is amazing at compensating. Other muscles can take over. Inflammation might settle down initially, but that underlying structural failure is a major concern.
And the rates of these re-tears, especially for large and massive tears, are quite high.
Shockingly high in some studies. The paper cites research reporting recurrent tearing in as many as 94% of these cases.
94%? Wow.
It's a sobering statistic. It means that even if things look good right after surgery, follow-up imaging, maybe an MRI a year or two later, might show the tendon has torn again.
That really drives home the point you made. Feeling better isn't always the same as being structurally healed.
It's a critical distinction. And it highlights the need for solutions that promote genuine biological healing, not just temporary symptom relief.
The review mentions more data, too, a big meta-analysis from 2015.
Yes, involving over 8,000 patients. It found that overall, around 26.6% of all rotator cuff repairs fail to heal structurally.
So roughly a quarter. That's a huge number across the board.
It really underscores the scale of the problem we're talking about. It's not a niche issue.
So the big question then is why? Why do so many repairs fail to heal, especially these larger ones?
The paper points to a few key factors. First and foremost is often the tissue quality itself.
Meaning the tendon is already damaged.
Exactly. Patients with these massive tears often have poor quality degenerative tendons with an inadequate blood supply.
Like trying to sew old, frayed fabric that doesn't get enough blood flow to mend?
That's a very good analogy. The basic building blocks for healing just aren't optimal. These tendons can be thin, fragile, they have lost their elasticity. It makes getting a secure repair that actually holds and heals incredibly difficult.
That makes sense. The material itself is compromised from the start.
Precisely. And then you have patient demographics playing a role too.
Like age.
Yes, the review notes that healing outcomes are even worse in elderly patients, with inferior rates of both healing and recurrence.
Which is entirely surprising, I guess. Healing generally slows down as we age.
Right. You have general tissue degeneration, slower cell turnover, maybe reduced blood flow, other health conditions sometimes. It all stacks up against robust healing in older individuals compared to, say, a young, healthy athlete with a traumatic tear.
Okay, so we have poor tissue quality, high re-tear rates, factors like age. It sounds like a perfect storm of challenges. What does this mean for surgeons trying to get better results?
It means there's a relentless drive for something better. The review emphasizes a really strong link. Those with healed rotator cuff repair have better clinical outcomes.
So true healing equals better long-term results.
Generally, yes. When the tendon genuinely heals and integrates properly, patients tend to report less pain, they regain more strength, and they're less likely to have the problem come back years later.
And that's the motivation behind looking for new techniques and materials.
Exactly. The goal isn't just symptom management. It's about promoting true biological structural healing that lasts.
Which leads us directly to patch augmentation.
Precisely. The whole idea behind using a patch is that it can potentially do two crucial things. First, it can mechanically reinforce the repair, make it stronger right away, like adding scaffolding.
Taking the stress off the initial repair.
Exactly. And second, ideally, it encourages biological healing. It might provide a scaffold for new tissue to grow into, maybe even deliver substances that stimulate the body's own repair processes. It's trying to give the body a helping hand, both physically and biologically.
Okay, so a helping hand with a patch. It sounds simple, maybe like sticking a piece of tape over the tear, but I'm guessing it's much more complex than that.
Oh, much more sophisticated, yes. At its core, patch augmentation means using an extra piece of material to patch, or graft, to strengthen the rotator cuff repair.
But it's not just about strength, you said.
No, the goal is really twofold. It needs to provide that immediate biomechanical support, protecting the fragile repair while it starts to heal. But it also aims to, ideally, induce native tissue growth.
So it encourages the body's own tissue to grow into it.
That's the hope. The ideal patch isn't just a passive support. It's meant to be a biologically active participant, a scaffold that encourages regeneration and eventually integrates, becoming part of the healed tendon.
And this idea, using patches, it's not brand new, is it? The review mentions it has a history.
That's a really important point. While it feels very modern, surgeons were experimenting with augmenting rotator cuff repairs decades ago, even back in the 80s.
What kinds of materials were they using back then?
Various things, some early animal-derived tissues, some early synthetic materials. But those first attempts often ran into major problems.
Like what?
The big one was inflammation. The review describes a profound inflammatory reaction in many cases.
Meaning the body saw the patch as foreign and attacked it.
Essentially, yes. The immune system would mount a strong response, trying to reject or wall off this foreign material. And as you can imagine, that led to poor outcomes, pain, stiffness, and ultimately the failure of the augmentation.
So a good idea in principle, but the materials weren't quite right biologically.
Exactly. It was a really crucial lesson in biocompatibility. The material has to work with the body, not against it.
So what changed? What allowed this concept to make such a comeback?
The real game changer was technology, specifically breakthroughs in how these materials, especially animal-derived ones, are processed and purified.
You mean cleaning them up better?
In essence, yes. Take animal extracellular matrix, or ECM patches, that's the natural scaffold around cells. Modern versions go through much more modern and complete DNA extracting procedures.
Removing the animal DNA?
Primarily, yes, and other cellular components, debris. Basically anything that the human immune system is likely to react strongly against.
Ah, so less foreign stuff means less inflammation.
Precisely. This better processing leads to a significantly reduced inflammatory response. Often it's subclinical, meaning it's so mild the patient doesn't even notice it and it doesn't interfere with healing.
And that's why there's this renewed interest, because the patches are better tolerated now.
That's a huge part of it. It resulted in a renewed interest in rotator cuff repair with patch augmentation because it made successful integration much more likely, turning it from a risky experiment into a genuinely viable option.
Okay, so with these better materials, what kinds of patches are actually being used now? The review breaks them down into categories, right?
Yes, three main categories. First, you have xenografts.
Xeno meaning foreign or other, so animal derived.
Exactly. These come from animal tissues. Common ones are porcine dermal grafts from pig skin or porcine small intestine submucosa, known as SAS. There's also bovine pericardium from cows or even ovine foregut matrix from sheep.
And these are heavily processed to remove the animal cells.
Very heavily processed, decellularized, sterilized. The goal is to leave just the structural collagen framework to act as a scaffold for human cells to grow into.
Okay, so that's xenografts. What's the second category?
That would be autografts and allografts. These are human-derived.
Auto meaning self, allo meaning other human.
Correct. Autografts use the patient's own tissue, maybe fascia lata from the thigh, part of the quadriceps tendon, or even a flap of periosteum, the membrane covering bone.
The advantage there must be no rejection, right?
Virtually zero risk of rejection, which is great. But the downside is you need a second surgery site to harvest that tissue, which brings its own potential problems. Pain, weakness, longer surgery time.
Okay, so that's autografts. What about allografts?
Allografts use tissue from a human donor, usually deceased. A common one is a cellular human dermal graft skin that's been processed to remove all the donor cells, leaving just the collagen matrix.
So similar processing to the xenografts, but starting with human tissue.
Exactly. It avoids the second surgery site for the patient, but you still need rigorous screening and processing to ensure safety and minimize any potential immune response, though it's generally less vigorous than with xenografts.
Got it. And the third category, the engineered ones.
Synthetic grafts. These are man-made materials. Polymers like polyester, polypropylene, polycarbonate polyurethane.
Were the early ones just like inert meshes?
Pretty much. Designed mostly for mechanical reinforcement. But the really exciting developments now are in things like nanoscaffolds.
Nanoscaffolds, that sounds high-tech.
It is. Using techniques like 3D printing or electrospinning, researchers can create scaffolds at the nanoscale that are designed to very closely mimic the body's own natural tissue structure, the ECM.
The idea being not just support, but actually guiding cell growth.
Precisely. To create an environment that encourages cells to behave naturally, differentiate correctly, and regenerate healthy tissue, it's moving towards regenerative engineering.
So xenograft, autograft, allograft, synthetic, each with its own history, pros, cons, and place in this search for the perfect patch, I guess.
That's a great way to put it. And the review really digs into the scientific and clinical evidence for each of these, trying to see which ones are closest to achieving that ideal.
Okay, let's get into that science then. We know the types, but how are they supposed to work? Let's start with biomechanics. From an engineering standpoint, what's the main goal?
The primary biomechanical aim is straightforward. Make the repair stronger. You want to construct the tendon, plus the patch, that can handle significantly more load than the tendon repaired on its own.
Why is that initial strength so critical?
Because the native tendon, right after being sutured, is incredibly weak and vulnerable. Normal shoulder movements could potentially re-tear it. The patch acts like an internal brace, shielding the repair site from excessive stress during that crucial early healing phase.
Like a protective shield while the real healing happens underneath.
Exactly. It provides a window for the biological processes to kick in without the repair being immediately compromised by mechanical forces.
And does the lab evidence back this up? Do these patches actually make the repair stronger?
Yes, generally they do. Lab studies, often using cadaver shoulders, which allow for controlled testing, have shown that synthetic patches, allografts, and the dermal xenografts, like the porcine ones, have all been shown to significantly increase construct strength and load to failure rates.
Meaning they can take more force before breaking.
Correct. Which is very encouraging for protecting the repair early on. However, it's not universal. Some materials, like that porcine SIS we mentioned, have shown less favorable outcomes biomechanically. They just weren't as strong.
Okay, so strength is good, but the review mentions this fascinating concept, the Goldilocks problem almost. You don't want it too strong. That sounds weird.
It does sound counterintuitive, but it's a really critical point called stress shielding.
Stress shielding. Explain that.
Okay, imagine you put a ridiculously strong, rigid metal plate on a broken bone. That plate might take all the load, shielding the bone itself from the normal stresses it needs to stimulate healing and remodeling. The bone might not heal properly or could even weaken over time because it's not being worked.
Ah, I see. The tissue needs some stress to heal correctly.
Exactly. If the patch is too stiff and strong relative to the healing tendon, it can carry too much of the load. This prevents the tendon from getting the mechanical signals it needs to heal robustly and integrate with the patch. New tissue might not grow into the patch properly.
So too strong is bad, but obviously too weak is also bad because it just fails.
Precisely. If it's too weak, it doesn't provide enough protection and fails prematurely.
So the ideal patch has to hit that sweet spot, strong enough initially, but then what? What's the long-term goal for how it behaves?
The real challenge, the ultimate goal, is to create a graft that provides that initial support, but also actively encourages tissue infiltration and subsequent incorporation.
Becoming part of the body.
Ideally, yes, with desirable properties more similar to the native rotator cuff. The dream is a patch that remodels over time, integrates fully, and eventually becomes biologically and functionally indistinguishable from a native tendon. True regeneration, not just a permanent reinforcement.
Okay, that covers the mechanics. What about the histology? What's happening at the microscopic tissue level? Are we seeing this integration happen in human studies?
Well, that's where the data gets a bit thinner. The review notes there are limited histological studies investigating patch use for rotator cuff repair in humans.
Why so few? Is it hard to get tissue samples?
Very hard, ethically and practically. You generally wouldn't do a biopsy on a healing tendon unless there was a clinical reason for reoperation. So much of our detailed histological understanding still comes from animal studies.
Which are useful, but not always a perfect match for humans.
Correct. They give us important clues, but we have to be cautious extrapolating directly.
So based on the available studies, human and animal, what's the verdict at the tissue level? Do patches promote good healing?
It's quite mixed, honestly. The review states there are variable healing outcomes with patch augmentation, depending on the type of graft used.
So it really depends on the specific material.
Yes, and frustratingly, there's even disagreement among studies using the same material, which highlights how many factors are at play: surgical technique, patient biology, how the histology was assessed. It's complex.
But surely there must be some positive signs. Any materials that consistently show good tissue integration.
Oh yes, definitely some promising findings.
Yeah.
Human dermal allograft, for example, has generally performed well in histological studies. They see good signs like cellular infiltration, meaning the patient's own cells are moving into the graft, revascularization, new blood vessels forming, and evidence of new tendon formation.
That sounds like exactly what you'd want to see.
It is. Porcine dermal grafts have also yielded encouraging outcomes in animal studies, showing similar positive signs of integration. And autografts, being the patient's own tissue, also show encouraging histological outcomes in animal models, with improved tendon healing. These are all good indicators that biological incorporation can happen.
Okay, but what about the other side of the coin? Any materials that looked less impressive under the microscope?
Yes, that porcine SIS, again, despite some early animal optimism, human studies reported unsatisfactory outcomes histologically, often showing inflammation, poor cell growth, not much new tissue.
So the poor clinical results matched the poor tissue integration.
Seems so. And some of the older synthetic grafts, like polyester, were often seen histologically as just remaining inert foreign bodies. They reinforced mechanically for a while, but didn't really integrate or promote new tissue growth within their structure.
What about adverse reactions? You mentioned the inflammation issues with early patches. Is that still a major concern with the modern ones?
It's always a consideration, but the situation has improved dramatically. While adverse reactions are now considered generally rare, they have been reported even with newer materials.
Like what?
Well, we already discussed the severe inflammatory reactions to porcine SIS, but interestingly, one study by Rashid et al. Found that even some otherwise promising human allografts and porcine dermal grafts could occasionally cause significant disruption of the ECM of the underlying native tendon.
Meaning they could actually damage the tendon they were supposed to help.
In some cases, yes, leading to more fragile, disorganized tissue underneath. It highlights how complex the host-graft interaction is, and that even generally well-tolerated materials aren't perfect in every single instance.
But the review stresses that most of the severe reactions were seen with the older, less purified models, right?
Correct, and that's a crucial takeaway. The paper explicitly says most of these adverse reactions have investigated the earlier models. Thanks to the improved processing, especially the better DNA extraction for animal ECM patches, the inflammatory responses now are usually much milder, often subclinical.
And these milder responses don't seem to hurt the clinical outcome.
Generally, they seem not to affect clinical outcomes in most patients. It really underscores how critical that manufacturing and purification process is, not just for integration, but for basic safety and tolerance.
So the lab work, the biomechanics, the histology, they give us a foundation. But the ultimate test is how these patches perform in real patients, isn't it? How do they actually affect recovery and long-term results in the clinic?
Exactly. That's the crucial next step, and interpreting that clinical data, as the review makes very clear, is very challenging.
Okay, so why is it so challenging to get clear answers from the clinical studies? If surgeons are using these patches, shouldn't we know by now what works best?
You'd think so, but there are several complicating factors. Firstly, there's just immense variety of implantation approaches, surgical techniques, and patches used.
So different surgeons doing things differently.
Exactly. Different patch materials, different ways of fixing them, open versus arthroscopic surgery, even different rehab protocols afterwards. All this variation leads to highly variable outcomes that are really difficult to compare meaningfully across studies.
Like comparing apples, oranges, and maybe pears.
Pretty much. Secondly, many of the existing studies are relatively small, or they're not direct comparisons between different patch types. Often they have only a small number of comparative studies or research investigating each patch type, often with a short follow-up period.
So we don't have enough big, long-term head-to-head trials yet.
Not nearly enough. You need those kinds of studies to draw really definitive conclusions.
So given all that variability, what do we know? What's the range of results people are seeing?
It's incredibly wide. A meta-analysis mentioned in the review by Uni et al. Looked at re-tear rates after patch augmentation. They found the rates ranged anywhere from a really good 8.3% all the way up to a very disappointing 73.4%.
Wow, 8% to 73%, that's a massive difference. What determines where a study falls in that range?
It depends heavily on the graft type, indication, and technique. Which patch was used? Why was it used for a primary repair, a revision, an irreparable tear? How was it put in? All these factors influence the outcome dramatically.
Okay, let's try to break it down by type then. Starting with xenografts, the animal ones. The review suggested pretty mixed results there, a real learning process.
Very mixed, yes. A clear example is porcine small intestine submucosa, the SIS patch. It consistently showed poor results in clinical trials.
Like that big randomized trial you mentioned.
Exactly. Iannotti et al. Did a randomized controlled trial, a strong study design, and found no significant improvement with SIS. In fact, healing rates were worse in the SIS group. Only 27% healed compared to 60% in the control group without a patch.
Worse healing. That's the opposite of what you want from an augmentation.
Absolutely. Other studies by Bryant et al. And Sklamberg et al. Found similar things. No benefit, poor radiological outcomes, and unsatisfactory clinical outcomes, with Sklamberg reporting a 91% re-tear rate.
So SIS was pretty much a dead end for a rotator cuff repair.
It seems that way based on the evidence. It really illustrates that early promise in animal models doesn't always translate to human success.
But what about other xenografts? Did the porcine dermal grafts fare better?
Much better, yes. Porcine dermal grafts have shown considerably more promise clinically.
What kind of results are we talking about?
Some studies are quite impressive. Avanzi et al. Reported a healing rate of 97.6% in the patch group, which is remarkably high compared to just under 60% in their control group. They also saw better tendon thickness and function.
That's a huge difference.
It is. Castagna et al. Found significant functional improvements even when using these patches for recurrent tears as a salvage option. Lederman et al. Also reported significantly better functional scores. So a much more positive picture for this type of xenograft.
And this is where the review highlights work involving Professor Imam and his colleagues, right? Their research seems to back up the promise of these porcine ECM grafts.
Yes, absolutely. The paper specifically cites studies by Consigliere et al., a research group where Professor Mohammed Imam is a co-author. Their work in 2017 and 2021 looked at a denatured porcine ECM patch.
And what did they find?
They found significantly improved functional outcomes and pain scores compared to baseline. And importantly, their 2021 study reported lower structural failure rates, only about 15.9% re-tears, which compared favorably to historical controls for similar large tears repaired without a patch.
So their own research directly contributes to this positive evidence base for certain xenografts?
Precisely. It's a clear example of how the author's expertise, including Professor Imam's, has directly shaped our understanding and provided key data supporting these techniques.
That's great to see. But even with these promising results, is it perfect? Are there any caveats for the porcine dermal grafts?
As always, in medicine, there's nuance. One study by Floria et al. Looked specifically at patients over 60 years old. They found that in this older group, the porcine dermal graft didn't lead to significantly better functional scores or lower re-tear rates compared to standard repair.
Suggesting that age might still be a limiting factor even with a good patch.
It might be, yes. Or perhaps the specific way it was used in that study. It just shows that effectiveness can still vary and patient selection remains really important.
Okay, let's move to the human-derived grafts. Autografts and allografts. The review seemed particularly positive about acellular human dermal allografts. Are they emerging as a leader?
The evidence certainly points in that direction. They appear to be the most consistently promising type based on current data.
What makes the evidence so strong?
Several well-designed studies show good results. Barber et al. Did a prospective randomized study again, high-quality evidence comparing standard repair-to-repair augmented with a human dermal allograft.
And the results?
Strikingly different. 85% of patients in the augmented group had an intact cuff on MRI, compared to only 40% in the control group. They also had better functional outcomes and, importantly, no complications related to the graft itself.
85% versus 40% healed is a big deal.
It really is. And other studies by Jalal, Petrie, Hall, and others have reported similarly positive outcomes, creating a consistent pattern of success for this specific type of allograft.
Was there one study that directly compared different patch types and singled out the human dermal allograft?
Yes, a study by Lusinger et al. In 2016 did just that. They compared a xenograft, an allograft, specifically graft jacket, a human dermal product, and a synthetic graft. Their conclusion: the human dermal allograft yielded the best outcome scores.
That's pretty compelling comparative evidence.
It is. It really suggests that, based on what we know now, this material might be leading the pack.
What about autografts using the patient's own tissue? Are they used often?
Less often, mainly because of that second surgical site needed for harvesting. That adds risk, pain, and recovery time.
But they are still an option, maybe for specific situations?
Yes. Crucial perhaps for patients who object to animal or donor tissue for personal or religious reasons, and they could work well. Mori et al. Showed significantly better outcomes using fascia lata autografts for tears deemed irreparable otherwise.
But the donor site is a real concern.
It can be. Tempelaer et al. Reported good shoulder outcomes using quadriceps tendon autografts, but also noted high rates of complications at the donor site in the thigh. It's a trade-off.
And there's a cautionary tale about autografts too, isn't there? Something about a periosteel flap.
Ah, yes, the humeral periosteel flap. Initially, back in 2006, Scheibel et al. Reported promising results using this flap of bone membrane from the upper arm bone.
Looked good at first.
Yes, but then a later study by Hollein et al. In 2019, with longer follow-up, found no improvement in healing response and actually unsatisfactory clinical outcomes.
So the initial promise didn't hold up over time.
Exactly. It led the researchers to conclude they could no longer recommend this approach. It's a vital lesson. Short-term results aren't always predictive, and medical evidence is constantly evolving based on longer-term data.
A really important reminder. Okay, last category. Synthetic and biologically enhanced grafts. What's their clinical story?
The early synthetic grafts, like some polyesters, generally had poor long-term outcomes. That study by Renebo et al., with nearly 20-year follow-up, found poor results, and disturbingly, 75% of patients developed cuff tear arthropathy.
Severe arthritis caused by the failed repair.
Yes, likely because the graft didn't integrate biologically, failed mechanically over time, and led to abnormal joint mechanics and degeneration.
But newer synthetics are showing more potential.
They are. Material science has advanced. Ciampi et al. Found significantly improved function and re-tear rates using a newer polypropylene patch. And Kai et al. Explored 3D collagen scaffolds, finding better re-tear rates and tendon bone integration in the short term.
Do these newer synthetics still face that stressed shielding problem?
It remains a critical challenge, yes. Synthetics often have very different mechanical properties than native tendon, usually much stiffer. This mismatch can lead to that stress shielding effect, where the patch carries too much load, potentially hindering the natural healing and remodeling of the tendon itself. Finding that perfect balance of initial support and eventual load sharing is key.
What about the really futuristic sounding ones, the nanoscaffolds?
They've recently garnered more interest because their design, at the nanoscale, aims to mimic the natural ECM much more closely. The theory is this promotes better cell behavior and tissue regeneration.
And is it working in practice?
One study by Kim et al. Found superior tendon healing in animals, but the exact reasons why are still poorly understood. The big caveat is that we're still waiting on significant clinical trials in humans for these cutting-edge materials. Huge promise, but early days clinically.
And finally, what about combining grafts with biological boosters, stem cells, growth factors?
That's a really exciting area, trying to get the best of both mechanical support and biological stimulation. But the clinical results so far are quite mixed.
Some positive, some not.
Exactly. Zhang et al. Had good results combining a scaffold with mesenchymal stem cells in preclinical models. But Mensch et al. Reported poor functional results when they tried adding PRP and bone marrow aspirate, sources of growth factors and stem cells, to a human dermal allograft in patients.
So just adding biology isn't a guaranteed fix. It's more complicated.
It seems so. The timing, the dose, the specific factors, how they interact with the graft material, it all likely matters. There's lots of encouraging preclinical research, but the review concludes we urgently need well-designed prospective clinical trials to figure out how to make biological enhancement work reliably in humans.
So a lot learned, but still much to figure out about the materials themselves. And as you said, the material is only half the story. How it's put in surgically is just as crucial.
Absolutely. A perfect patch material is useless if you can't get it in the right place and secure it properly.
How has the surgical approach changed over time? Were these always done arthroscopically?
No, initially, many surgeons used traditional open surgery for these complex repairs and augmentations. Bigger incision, more dissection.
But now,
Now, with huge advancements in arthroscopic technology and skills, minimally invasive techniques are much more common. Patch augmentation done arthroscopically have gained popularity in recent years.
through those small keyhole incisions with a camera.
Exactly. Less tissue trauma, potentially less pain, faster recovery. The review kind of implicitly shows this evolution in its figures, moving from simpler concepts to more refined arthroscopic steps for deploying and fixing the patch.
What were some of the early arthroscopic techniques like?
Often they involve just overlaying the patch on top of the repaired tendon. It was mainly secured laterally at the bone attachment site, without strong fixation on the inner medial side, closer to the muscle.
And why was that medial fixation found to be so important? This seems like a key insight highlighted in the review, particularly involving Professor Imam's group.
It was a pivotal realization. The authors, including Professor Imam, understood that for the patch to effectively share the load with the healing tendon, which is crucial for promoting healing, it needs to be anchored securely on both sides. Medial stabilization of the patch to the cuff is crucial.
So it needs to be fixed to the healthy tendon medially as well as the bone laterally.
Precisely. If it's only fixed laterally, it can't effectively bridge the gap and distribute the forces. The repair underneath might still see too much stress. It needs that tension band effect across the whole repair.
And this led Professor Imam and his colleagues to develop a specific technique, the pullover technique.
Yes, that's a fantastic example of their direct contribution to surgical innovation. The review explicitly mentions the pullover technique, described in a 2017 paper by Narvani, Imam, Polyzois, and others.
How does that work differently?
Instead of just laying the patch flat on top, this technique involves strategically passing sutures to pull over or wrap the patch around the medial edge of the remaining healthy tendon cuff and securing it there, as well as laterally. It creates a more compressive, encompassing, and biomechanically sound augmentation.
So a more sophisticated way to achieve that crucial load sharing.
Exactly. It represents a significant step forward from simple overlay techniques, directly addressing that biomechanical need for medial stability.
Are there other modern techniques being used now as well?
Yes, the field keeps innovating. Surgeons now use special deployment devices, think of them like sophisticated inserters, to help position the patch accurately in the tight joint space arthroscopically.
Making it easier and more reliable.
That's the goal. And fixation methods have evolved too. They might use special staples made of materials like polylactic acid or PEEK to secure the patch medially, anteriorly, and posteriorly, getting multiple points of fixation.
But is there one single best way to do it now?
Not yet. The review notes there's currently no consensus on any single method that should be used. It's still an area of active research, debate, and refinement. Different surgeons might prefer different techniques depending on the tear, the patch, and their own experience.
The review also mentions that advancements in other complex shoulder surgeries might be helping push patch augmentation forward.
Yes, there's definitely a crossover effect. Procedures like superior capsular reconstruction, or SCR, have become more popular for irreparable tears.
And SCR also uses patches.
Often, yes. A patch is used to reconstruct the top part of the joint capsule to restore stability. The development of better instruments, anchors, and techniques specifically for SCR has been a contributing factor to improving the tools available for patch augmentation of the rotator cuff, too. They learn from each other.
And Professor Imam has been involved in SCR research as well.
Yes, the review mentions he co-authored a systematic review on SCR back in 2019, showing his broad expertise across complex shoulder reconstruction.
There's also this intriguing belt and braces or hamburger technique mention, also linked to Professor Imam's group. What's that about?
That's a really cutting-edge concept, described in a paper by Memon, Imam, and colleagues in 2020. The idea is to combine both patch augmentation of the rotator cuff and an SCR procedure.
Two patches, essentially, one on top, one maybe underneath or acting as the capsule.
Kind of like that, hence the hamburger analogy. You have the repaired cuff, augmented with a patch, the belt, and then an SCR construct as well, the braces. The goal is maximum stability and healing potential for the most severely damaged shoulders.
Has that been proven in clinical trials yet?
Not yet. The review states that clinical trials are yet to be completed. But it represents the kind of innovative thinking happening at the forefront, combining techniques to tackle the toughest problems, driven by experts like Professor Imam and his collaborators.
So materials are improving, techniques are getting more sophisticated. It feels like we're definitely heading in the right direction. But what are the big remaining questions? What does the road ahead look like?
Well, one of the really fascinating points the review brings up is this persistent disconnect we sometimes see. The radiological outcomes, what an MRI or ultrasound shows about the tendon healing, do not always match the clinical outcomes the patient experiences.
You mentioned this earlier, patients feeling better even if the scan shows a re-tear.
Exactly. Especially with larger tears or in older patients, many still do well clinically. Their pain is better, function is improved, even if the structural repair isn't perfect on imaging.
So does that mean the structural healing doesn't matter as much as we thought?
Not necessarily. While symptom relief is paramount, the authors, including Professor Imam, strongly argue that the evidence still shows those with well-healed tendons do have superior clinical outcomes in the long run.
Better durability, maybe less chance of problems later.
That's the idea. A truly healed tendon is likely to provide more sustained pain relief, better strength, and be less prone to later degeneration or re-tearing compared to one that hasn't healed structurally, even if the patient feels okay initially.
So the ultimate goal isn't just good clinical outcomes anymore.
The ambition for the next decade, as the paper puts it, should be to not only have good clinical outcomes, but also improve the tendon healing rate. It's about achieving both making patients feel better and ensuring the underlying biology is truly restored for long-term success.
How do the experts, like Professor Imam and his co-authors, propose we get there? The review outlines some key strategies, right? 3 pillars for future progress.
Yes, they lay out a clear roadmap. Pillar number 1 is the continued development of patches resembling native tissue, creating grafts that mimic natural tendon as closely as possible in all aspects, mechanically, structurally, biologically.
To overcome stress shielding and encourage seamless integration.
Exactly. If the patch behaves almost identically to the native tissue, the body is more likely to accept it, remodel it, and integrate it fully.
Okay, pillar 1. Better mimicking. What's pillar 2?
Biological enhancement of patches. This is about actively stimulating healing, using things like stem cells, growth factors, or other bioactive molecules incorporated into the patch itself.
Moving beyond a passive scaffold to an active delivery system for healing signals.
Precisely. Giving the body's repair processes a direct boost right at the site of injury. It's about actively promoting regeneration at the cellular level.
And the third pillar, this sounds more practical, surgical.
It is improved instrumentation, developing better, more intuitive tools for surgeons to arthroscopically delivering and stabilizing the patches consistently and reliably without adding significantly to surgical time.
Because even the best patch is useless if it's too hard to put in correctly.
Absolutely. Surgical efficiency, reproducibility, and minimizing operative time are critical for any technique to be widely adopted and successful in the real world. Ease of use matters.
Right. So combining those three pillars, mimicking native tissue, biologically enhancing it, and making it easy to implant that leads to the vision of the perfect patch.
That's the ultimate goal described in the paper. A patch that provides the right initial biomechanical reinforcement, actively, biologically promotes healing and cellular infiltration without an adverse tissue reaction, and is also easy to deliver surgically and stabilize it arthroscopically.
It's a tall order, but it sounds like the direction the field is heading.
It is. It's about creating a solution that works on all levels mechanically, biologically, and practically.
But despite all this progress and exciting potential, are there still big unanswered questions? Ongoing debates?
Oh, definitely. The review acknowledges there's still debate over the superiority of patch augmentation over standard repairs in terms of healing improvement, especially when you consider all types of tiers and patients. It's not yet definitively proven better for everyone.
Which means we need more research.
Urgently. The paper concludes with a very strong call for high-quality prospective clinical trials. We need large, well-designed studies that directly compare different graft types against each other and against standard repair, looking carefully at both clinical and radiological outcomes.
Randomized controlled trials, the gold standard.
Exactly. They need to be sufficiently powered to give clear answers and randomized to avoid bias. That's how we'll really know which patches work best for which patients and using which techniques.
So the journey is far from over, even with these incredible advancements.
Far from over, but incredibly promising. Patch augmentation is, without doubt, an exciting topic. It represents a major step forward, and as the review predicts, it will surely be the subject of many scientific discussions in the next decade. The potential for truly improving how we treat these debilitating injuries is immense. #outro.
Wow, what a fascinating deep dive. We've really covered a lot of ground today. We started with the significant challenge of massive rotator cuff tears, those high re-tear rates, the difficulties in healing.
Then we trace the evolution of patch augmentation, from early problematic attempts to the modern, better-tolerated xenografts, allografts, and the potential of synthetics.
We explored the intricate science, the biomechanics of load sharing and stress shielding, the histological evidence of tissue integration, both good and bad.
And we looked at the real-world clinical data, which is complex but shows real promise for certain materials like human dermal allografts and modern porcine dermal grafts, including the important contributions from research involving Professor Mohammed Imam and his team.
We also touched on how surgical techniques have evolved, becoming less invasive and more sophisticated, with innovations like medial stabilization and the pullover technique, again highlighting Professor Imam's contributions to the field.
And finally, we looked ahead at the ongoing quest for the perfect patch, one that mimics native tissue, boosts biology, and is easy for surgeons to use, while acknowledging the crucial need for more high-quality trials.
The key takeaway seems to be that patch augmentation, used selectively and with the right materials and techniques, holds real potential to improve outcomes for patients struggling with these difficult tears. But it's a field that's definitely still evolving.
Maturing, yes, with lots more to learn.
So, as you, our listener, consider the incredible complexity of the human shoulder and the sheer ingenuity of the medical science trying to repair it, maybe you're left wondering something similar to what I am. How close are we, really, to creating truly regenerative solutions, like living biological spare parts that fully integrate?
And what other parts of the body might benefit from this kind of approach, pushing the boundaries of healing and regeneration? It's a fascinating thought.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.
We hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity. Until next time.